So what's up, people, and welcome to another video. Yeah, I don't know how to classify this one. I guess it'll be a comic discussion. And it's one of those off-the-wall, impromptu things that I started thinking about. And it's really kind of strange, so I apologize right from the beginning. Maybe I've been cooped up in my home for such a long time that my mind is going weird. But it's one of those things that I started thinking about. And as you can see here, it kind of talks about, the Fantastic Four, Battle Angel Alita, and One Piece. And specifically, I want to focus on the character of Reed Richards, Sechs, and Luffy. And the question that came out for me is, to simply put it, do you feel elastic power is a cool power? And if so, is there anything that Reed Richards can learn from Sechs and Luffy? And no, I'm not talking about intelligence. Luffy is about as intelligent as a rock. And Reed Richards is one of the smartest people out there. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the cool factor. I'm talking about basically, something that will make a superhero really superhero, which basically comes down to fighting, right? So I used to read Fantastic Four as a comic way long time ago and watch the cartoon. The old cartoons that they had back in the old days? And one thing I will admit, of all the Marvel heroes that came out around that time, which were, Thor, Hulk, Spider-Man, Captain America, and Fantastic Four was the least interesting comic for me and the least interesting animation for me. And I wasn't sure exactly why. It didn't strike me and get me all excited like a lot of the other cartoons did. And it's interesting because if I think about it, is it because of Ben Grimm? And no, of course not. I mean, he is not Hulk, but he is goofy enough that you do get to like him as a character. Human Torch was just plain cool, so I didn't think Johnny Storm was the issue. In fact, Johnny Storm was the saving grace, and of course Susan Storm was perfectly fine. I figured that maybe they could have done more with that character, seriously, but okay, I'll accept that. And I realized that one of the problems I had with the Fantastic Four was the leader, Reed Richards. And for me, I just didn't find this character to be all that exciting. And I have to stop here and first say that I haven't been following Fantastic Four at all for a seriously long time, so I don't know if the modern day Reed Richards resolves this problem. So I am talking about the classic Fantastic Four and the classic Mr. Fantastic, right? And I just never got into this character. Yeah, okay, he was smart. But when you're a kid, you're kind of like, okay, smarts, that's nice. And you rather see Tony Stark than you see Reed Richards. He never really stood out compared to somebody like Tony Stark, And then as far as his power is concerned, yeah, it was there. It was interesting, but I never found him to be all that cool. And throughout the longest time, I blamed it on his superpower, which was elasticity, right? I mean, just how cool can elasticity be? And for the longest time, I just shunned it for that particular reason. But then, I started looking at other characters as I later on started reading other comics. Notably Battle Angel Alita, Last Order, and One Piece. And to be honest, I found that there were two characters in these two comics that had the same power as Reed Richards, and yet they were really, really cool. Now, of course, in One Piece, it's the main character, right? Monkey D. Luffy. And in Last Order, it's, well, it's Zex. And, well, Zex is a character by himself, and even if he doesn't do anything, he may be charismatic as it is. So, same with Luffy, and maybe that's why I find them more notable than Reed Richards. But I don't think that's the only reason. I find that their fighting is exciting. I find that their action is interesting, and yet they have the same power as Mr. Fantastic. So why is Mr. Fantastic not so fantastic, and all these other characters a lot more fantastic than Mr. Fantastic? And in fact, if I were to take Elastigirl from The Incredibles, I found her to be even more exciting than Mr. Fantastic, although I didn't put her into this group here, and maybe I should have. And so the question that came out for me is why? Why is that the case? Why can the same power in two other comics be so cool, and then when you go back to something like Marvel and the Fantastic Four, it's just not all that exciting? And so I kind of thought about it, and I finally realized what I may think may be the case, and why I wanted to make this video is because I'm not up to speed with the Marvel comics, especially Fantastic Four. I wasn't sure if the recent Mr. Fantastic has become much better and is a really cool character now. The way Aquaman got rewritten to be much more like the Submariner, for example, right? But if not, then the question that still comes up is why? And I wanted to bring some discussions up of what makes the difference between Luffy or Zex and Reed Richards. And so, I would like your input with regards to that and to see if this makes all sense. Now, before I start, spoiler alert, with the case of Fantastic Four, since I myself don't know enough about that recently, I don't think there is anything to spoil in that side. As far as Battle Angel Alita, well, Zex only comes out in the Last Order story. And this is the first time I actually even mentioned that he has elastic power, right? A lot of people who haven't read Last Order probably are like, I didn't even realize that. So there's probably going to be spoilers in there with regards to the details of some of his capabilities and some of his characteristics as well. And as far as probably the biggest spoilers is with One Piece. Now, if you've read the manga or watched the animation up to Dressrosa and possibly to Whole Cake Island, then you're not going to be spoiled at all. If you're up to speed, then of course you won't be spoiled. But for people who are still going through the early chapters, I will be going into a lot of things that are very specific to Monkey D. Luffy, and it's capabilities that I don't think if you're reading the early chapters you should listen to. I know I've been following, for example, Dragonate, and Dragonate's right now in the Skypiea arc. So for that part of the story, I would suggest that anybody who's in that level turn off this video, because there are some significant reveals that will be coming up, which you don't want to hear about right now. Okay, so with that said, I think that's my quick spoiler alert for this one. So as far as fighting is concerned, I'm just going to focus right on the fighting, because that's where I find Mr. Fantastic to be seriously lacking compared to somebody like Spider-Man or Captain America, T'Challa, whoever, right? Even Black Widow, right? And so the question is, hey, some of these people don't even have superpowers, and how come they're more exciting than Mr. Fantastic, who actually has a superpower? And once again, I said that I used to think that it was because he had the stupidest superpower around, which was elastic power. And in fact, it was Mr. Fantastic himself that made me not watch One Piece for the first 5 years of its comic season because of the fact that I thought that when I heard Monkey D. Luffy had elastic powers and it was a pirate story, I said, sounds like the stupidest comic around. And now I'm like following it completely, and I really do like the actions of Monkey D. Luffy. So coming back again, why I say can Reed Richards learn from Sechs and Luffy is, why is it that the fans like these two characters so much and are lukewarm to Reed Richards? And so can he learn from what these two characters are doing to earn the fandom? And my feeling is that one of the problems that I see with Mr. Fantastic, at least back when I was watching, was because he was elastic. I think even the writers of the character kind of put him off to the side in terms of uber powers, right? He wasn't particularly OP. And if you watch, he did the stretchy thing to, catch the thing that was, unreachable by anybody else, did the stretchy thing to make a bridge and everybody could, run across. And it was cool. It was okay. It wasn't great, right? And it didn't make for a wow factor. And so, coming back, Reed Richards is a superhero. Sechs and Luffy are not, right? Sechs is kind of a mercenary and Luffy is a pirate. So, in many ways, you would expect that Reed Richards should be bigger in the wow factor because his profession requires that. But the way he's portrayed in the Marvel comic universe is he's kind of, the smart guy, right? He's the smart guy in the group. And so everybody else, goes to the front lines and does things. And then when there's somebody that needs to be reached from far away, then Reed Richards will jump in and do some stuff. But I feel that this makes his powers very limited. I mean, why is the writers purposely limiting his powers, and why is he considered, or why does he have that personality and that position in the group when the group itself is still a superhero group that's in the front lines of battle, right? And that's what I found to be difficult. He is not Charles Xavier, who sits in the school and through telekinetic powers, commands the team. Reed Richards is out in the front lines, and so he needs to be able to battle the way any of the other members of any of the Marvel superhero group should. And that comes back to, again, Sechs and Luffy. Bottom line, before anything else, before any of those elastic powers comes in, both Sechs and Luffy are trained to fight really, really well. They are extremely powerful, and even without their superpowers, they could be outrageously powerful fighters, as we have seen in many of the chapters, right? I mean, bottom line, Sechs didn't have elastic powers for a long time, right? I mean, Sechs was basically Alita for a little while, and then got his own sort of persona and his own martial arts. But his martial arts is based on Panzergunst, right? I mean, his martial arts is Sechs Angriff. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Is it Zexter Angriff? Maybe it's Zexter Angriff. But anyway, it's a variation of Panzerkunst. And because of that, he's up there with Alita as one of the strongest martial artists in the Battle Angel Alita comic verse. And because of that, you could understand why both these characters can battle in the front lines. They don't rely on the elasticity as a crutch. What they rely on the elasticity is as a tool. So now you add the elasticity onto their special fighting capabilities, and it becomes very interesting because of the fact that now, if you take Sechs and if you take Panzerkunst and you give him an unlimited reach and the ability to deform into the weirdest shapes that you could imagine and use the elastic capabilities for his punches and his counter punches, that becomes extremely powerful. And of course, Luffy is the same way, right? And that's why he does his Gum Jet Gatling and his Gum Bazooka and all those, which if you follow One Piece, you'll understand what I'm talking about. He's strong with just a single punch. But because he could prepare his punch by stretching his arms really far away, then he could actually, create outrageously powerful strikes. And because his arms are so elastic, of course, he could strike multiple times in a fraction of a second, which is his jet gatling, and turned himself into basically a machine weapon, right? And so, yeah, coming back, these creative ideas come from the fact that first they were fighters, and then they got the power. Whereas with Reed Richards, it's almost like he got the power, and then they weren't the writers were scratching their heads and go, okay, well, what can we do with elasticity? Okay, well, this guy can stretch. That's it. and they kind of gave up on the fighting capability. And what I don't understand is, why isn't Reed Richards a super strong fighter? And the question is yes, he is intelligent. He is, as intelligent as Tony Stark. I thought in the comics he may be even higher intelligence than Tony Stark. I'm not sure about that, so I apologize if I made that mistake. But he's at least as intelligent as Tony Stark. And so the coming back is if he's that smart, and he knows that he's going into the front lines to battle with the likes of Doctor Doom and all these other characters, why wouldn't he go out and train like a madman to make himself very strong in his martial arts, right? I mean, he has a relatively strong physique, and I would presume that as a profession of a superhero, he trains quite a bit. And considering the fact that some of his closest allies are people like Prince T'Challa and Steve Rogers, and even The Thing, Benjamin Grimm, why doesn't he work out and, learn fighting from these people? Why doesn't he have the ability to fight at the levels of Black Panther or Captain America? And yeah, okay, Black Panther has his special training, and he's learned how to strengthen his body. And Captain America has his super soldier serum, right? Hello, this is Reed Richards, one of the smartest people in the world. He should be able to do things with his science to enhance his body. In fact, he's the one person who I could see become similar to the Master Chief in Halo by creating nanites that would enhance the strength of his body. And if you combine it now with his elasticity that he got from the cosmic rays, then that will make him an outrageously powerful person. He could actually become like Spider-Man in some sense. Yeah, Spider-Man has to shoot webbing, and if he runs out of webbing, well, he's kind of, out of luck. But Reed Richards, yeah, he doesn't need webbing. He just shoots his hands, and he could swing from one building to another. Okay, that will take away the branding of Spider-Man. But what I'm saying is, there's so much more that he could do if he was allowed to be a capable fighter, which in the early, volumes of Fantastic Four, he was not. I don't know if he is in the later ones, but I do notice that in the cinematic universe, he's not particularly out there doing action, is he? So that's unfortunate. And then now, if you combine it with the elastic powers coming back, Zex, or let's start with Luffy. Luffy, right? He took his elastic powers, and Oda created some of the coolest and most interesting powers that Luffy had, and those are his gears, right? Gears 2, 3, and 4. And I'll avoid 3, and I'll just go with 2 and 4, for example. Okay, so 2, right? 2 is a interesting capability where he actually would put pressure on his blood vessels and constrict them down using his elastic powers. And by doing that, he could actually increase the density of his blood. And through that, he creates a form of blood doping. And by doing so, he actually can increase the speed and the strength of his body by a significant amount. And of course, the first time you see that against Bluno, you're like, oh, wow. You know, and this is some goofy dude for the most part in a lot of the entire One Piece story. But when he fights, yeah, people are like, yeah, you go, Luffy. You know, and so these creative methods that these writers come up with, where you take a relatively mundane strength like elasticity and take it to the next level. And so we'll go to Gear 4 now, right? In Gear 4, Luffy has the ability to take his elasticity and combine it with his Haki powers. And Haki is the One Piece equivalent of the spiritual power that you see in all these shonen comics, right? If it's Dragon Ball, it's Ki. If it's Naruto, I think it was Chakra. If it's Hunter x Hunter, it's Nen. And if it's Ruby, I think it was Aura, right? And there's a few others. I can't think of them at the moment. But you get the picture. In One Piece, it's Haki, right? And so he has the ability to strengthen and harden his body or get outrageous strength out of his Haki powers, spiritual powers. And when combining that with the elastic powers that he has, then he can take something like Gear 3, where he actually will inflate his entire body, including his bones. And by doing that, he could get a giant-sized body. And then when he infuses it with Haki, that body becomes outrageously hard, so that when he strikes, it's a devastating attack. But he can control it so well that he could still go back to his elastic levels. And when he becomes Gear 4 Snake Man, that is his exact attack, right? His punch will actually stretch out so far that it can ricochet off walls and come back to strike the opponent, even if he missed the first time. So it's kind of like a heat-seeking missile going after the target. And he fires it at such a high velocity that it looks like he's striking 10 times when he's only striking once. It's just flying all over the place. And because of that, the opponent can't figure out how to, block or to duck from that particular attack. And so these creative attacks are extremely interesting because it takes the character's already existing super strength to the next level. And of course, with Battle Angel Alita, you see that with Zex because of the fact that even compared to One Piece, Battle Angel Alita has some tremendously complex martial arts discussions, right? Panzerkunst, for example, is an extremely complex martial arts that goes into serious moves and synchronization and, speed control, three-dimensional attacks and all this. But when you then combine it with elasticity and give Zex the same powers that Luffy has, where he has unlimited reach, then he can attack from multiple areas. He could deform his body into multiple shapes and use that to enhance his power. And so if Luffy had his gears, Zex, of course, had his... One example is his implosion punch, right? Which is something where he would be up in the air, would actually expand his body into an outrageous size, a giant ball that is floating in the air, and then he would immediately contract that body at really fast speed so that all that force is then focused right onto the arm, and then he would shoot the arm to strike at a devastating power. And in fact, the engineer who developed his body, which is called the Fitzroy body, and I think of it as the third most notable body in Battle Angel Alita, next to Berserker and the Imaginos body. But with the Fitzroy body, the engineer who created it said, if Zex goes out of control and starts, beating up on everything, he could literally single-handedly destroy the Onion Frame, which was where the Zot Championship was taking place. And to give you an idea just how incredible that is, the Onion Frame is like 3 miles in size. It's about as big as Zalem. It's a stadium almost as big as Zalem. And he could single-handedly, with his punches, take it down using his implosion punch. And so, yeah. Why are these people able to use their elasticity in such a creative way and using it to enhance their already existing fighting skill? And why doesn't Marvel do that with Mr. Fantastic? Because like I said, even Elastigirl in The Incredibles, I didn't see the second movie, but I did see the first one, when she infiltrated that enemy base, I think the things she did was a lot cooler than Mr. Fantastic's typical, let me save that kitten up in the tree, whoop, sort of thing, Maybe I'm just being cynical. But anyway, I would think that the cool factor with Reed Richards can go significantly higher if they gave him outrageously strong fighting skills. And coming back again, why wouldn't he have that? Sure, he is a scientist in the beginning, but now he's a superhero. And being a superhero, his intelligent mind should have realized that maybe I should go train with Steve Rogers. Maybe I should go train with Prince T'Challa. And considering the fact that they respect each other enough, I would think that they would both say, yeah, sure, come on over and we can fight, And then somewhere along the way, after he becomes relatively strong enough, he realizes that that by itself isn't good enough still to protect his teammates. And so he starts, coming up with really creative ways to use his body and its elasticity and enhance the fighting skills. And so, for example, here's a example of something that I haven't seen in One Piece or in Battle Angel Alita. Since his body is elastic, it literally can create separate limbs, additional limbs, right? Because of the fact that he could stretch out part of his body and turn it into additional arms. Or, if he can use the nanites to actually strengthen and harden his body, those parts that extend out can be shaped into things like spears or blades. And he could actually control them similar to the way... not Venom. What was his name? Carnage. That's it. I had to go look it up. Sorry. Carnage can do. Maybe not to the extremes that Carnage can do. But, yeah, he could probably do some very interesting things just by multiplying the limbs that he has because he's elastic. There are other things that he may be able to do. And again, if he can control his elasticity and use his intelligence to make his body more enhanced, such as, again, nanites to strengthen his and harden his body the way Master Chief is, then there's some very interesting things that I think Marvel can do with Reed Richards. And that's why I said, can Reed Richards learn from Zex or Luffy? Or another way to say it is, can the Marvel writers look at the leader of the Fantastic Four and then look at some of these other characters that are elastic and come up with a more creative way of representing that particular person? Anyway, that's about it for this video. I apologize it took so long, and I just wanted to say this more as a question. Is Reed Richards okay? Has he become cool enough that I shouldn't have even bothered to make this video? Or is there an ability to do so? And if that's the case, can he use somebody like Monkey D. Luffy or Zex as an example to create a character that's a lot cooler than he currently is? Anyway, that's about it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll go back to my usual Battle Angel Alita videos in the future. I hope you join me at that time. Anyway, until then, have a nice day, everyone.